Welcome to The Peaks, everyone, our latest 33 Voices interview series showcasing women entrepreneurs. Every week, we're profiling an inspiring woman founder who's going to share 3 stories about how she built her business and why those experiences were so meaningful to her. I couldn't be more excited to welcome my friends Jordana Kier and Friedman to the show, the founders of Lola. Thank you guys for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Before we dive in, can you give anyone who may not know a brief intro into Lola?
Sure. Go for it.
Sure. So Lola is a new feminine care brand that is 100% cotton tampons in a customized assortment delivered directly to your door. So what Alex and I set out to do almost a year ago at this point was to provide a better product, a better brand, and delivered to you when you need it, wherever you need it.
I think that's the perfect way to actually intro the first story, because that's not how you guys started with your mission of creating a better tampon, not only a better way to get your tampons. Can you tell us about the focus groups that you had in the early days?
Sure. So as we were getting the business off the ground, we needed to confirm that there were women out there that would really care about this brand, this mission, want to use 100% cotton tampons, and hadn't ever thought about what was in the product before, and that question, what's in your product, would compel them to change their buying behavior and compel them to talk to their friends about this topic. And so to really kind of start the conversation and get the business off the ground, we planned a series of focus groups with friends and friends of friends, usually 8 to 12 women. We would invite them to our house or have some of them host with their friends at their homes. And the purpose was really twofold. One was to get them talking and hear about their behavior and their perceptions of feminine hygiene and the products that existed. And 2, to share with them our early idea of what we were trying to build and see if it resonated.
What was the early reception like?
It was one of kind of shock. Whenever we would always start this focus group or these focus groups with just kind of icebreaker stories. Remember 2.5 years ago, nobody was really talking about periods the way they do today. So it was really under the radar. It was marginalized. It was embarrassing. Even for us, it was embarrassing before, we kind of stepped outside of it and said, wait, why is it embarrassing? This is a business opportunity. So that's how kind of they always started. And then once we asked the question, sort of what's in your tampon, or, do you know what's in your tampon? There was like silence, because nobody had thought about this, not even us. And so that's what sparked the entire company. And so for us, that was sort of the reaction that gave us the validation that we were onto something, because, it was shock. And then it was, wait a minute, why, confusion, a little bit of anger. And then this feeling of like, we got to do something about it. And when you have, groups of women who are consistently reacting the same exact way, that's when Alex and I realized that we had a real opportunity in our hands.
There's a couple of areas that I want to dive in there. The first is how you guys made it approachable, because like you were saying, even 2.5 years ago, it was such a hush-hush topic. But when Lola came out and the voice that you guys have, we talked about it as my family over dinner. And that's just, it's not something that we do. My dad doesn't regularly tweet about feminine care products, but he always tweets about...
Yeah, now he does.
He always tweets about Lola. How did you guys think before these groups of a way to make people even feel comfortable talking?
It's the same way to get anybody talking about anything that's uncomfortable, which is you have to share first. We had to be vulnerable and share our first period stories, or the first time, we bled through a pair of underwear, or the fact that we've all put toilet paper in our underwear when we didn't have the products we needed, and really try and put ourselves out there to show how not embarrassing it really is and how common the experiences are.
How long did it take people to open up in those focus groups?
5 minutes.
Yeah, not long.
I think that's a testament to you guys.
With this, tell us the story of your first period, or the first time you used a tampon. And we would always go first. And I think, that just really helped to set the stage for the fact that, like, this was a very supportive environment. Like, we're not going to judge each other because I just told you about, like, this person who basically put a tampon in me for the first time. Like, there can't be a lot of judgment and ego. It has to feel like something like you're talking to your best friend or your sister, people who you already trust, and who you've already opened yourself up to.
And these muscles had been exercised before, right? Like, it was mostly women in their late 20s, early 30s at the focus groups, but everybody got their period 10, 15, 20 years ago. And at that point, everybody told their girlfriends, like, you knew of your 10 friends who had gotten their period and who hadn't. It wasn't a secret, but somehow between the age of 12 to 15 and, 27 to 35, women stopped talking about this topic. And so it really only took a couple minutes before they got back into it and were super comfortable.
So this isn't directly related to focus groups, but it's something that, as a fan, I'm very proud of Lola for. Why have you guys made it a part of your mission to stand up not only for these conversations within your community, but in the broader community?
What do you mean in the broader community? Just like across
different media channels, whether it's on the Lola blog. You guys had a great piece. Was that in the New York Times? Mm-hmm. The one that I loved, that piece where you really stood up and shared your stories?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it just comes from the DNA of the brand and what we're trying to build, which is, we need to share ourselves first to make the brand authentic. And the conversation is really a tool to get women to think critically about decisions they're making and make changes in their lives if and when they're important. And in our mind, women, for the most part, weren't thinking about what was in a product they used for a quarter of the month for 40 years of their lives because the topic was taboo or undiscussed. And in our mind, the solution was get people talking. When people talk, the next logical step is that suddenly they'll be thinking a little bit more about what's in the products, and hopefully if we can spur those conversations, we can change behavior. And so, we started with tampons, but the broader mission of the company is to do it across issues in feminine health and wellness. And, it's periods, but it's also everything else that goes undiscussed where a conversation would make women's health better.
What have been some of your favorite for each of you, like a favorite reaction from someone in the community, whether it's to the products or just the general mission that you guys have?
My favorite is when we were out in LA and doing focus groups, and somebody was like, we were talking about what's in, what do you think is in your tampon? And they were saying, well, it's cotton, right? And we said, actually, it's typically, it could be a little bit of cotton, but it's also rayon and polyester. There's a lot of things that are also in there. And somebody was like, but I don't even wear rayon. I just thought that was so funny.
Well, it's true though, because one of the best examples I thought you guys had when you first launched was how many times you inspect an orange or an apple before buying it. Totally. But you just throw the tampons in your cart and you keep going.
Totally. And I think that was, it was a very funny moment, but it was also this moment that it encapsulated a lot of what you just described of being very thoughtful and informed about everything that you're putting in and on your body. And this one thing had just been massively overlooked for all of us.
How about for you, Alex?
So one thing that comes to mind, all of the conversations we've had with people who are more informed than we are on this topic have been really exciting. And at first, they were few and far between. For the most part, we were pitching investors and we were educating. We were talking to our friends in our communities and we were educating. But we had this one meeting with the CEO of a business out in California, and we met her. She knows everything about fabric. She's in the clothing business. She knows everything about cotton. And we were telling her about our tampons, and maybe 20 seconds into the meeting, she was like, I know everything that you're saying already. Did you guys know that if you burn a mainstream brand tampon, it will melt like plastic, but if we burn one of yours, it will burn like a real fiber? And we had never done that before, and we were just sitting at her desk, and she took out the 2 tampons and burned them, and the mainstream brand just melted away. And that was one of the more powerful moments where we could see a real physical difference between the products. And frankly, it was probably the last time we went anywhere near a non-natural fiber tampon.
That's extremely alarming. I did not know that. Wow.
Yeah, scary.
So you mentioned pitching investors, and we're going to go for that for our second story. And I'm not going to say a word because this is great, and I could never believe that you guys did this. Can you tell us about the pitches?
Sure. When we first started the business, it was clear that there was only so far we could get without raising outside capital. We had already lined up our logistics partner, which I know we'll get to later. We had already lined up our web development partner, our PR firm. There were just like a lot of different things that we did where we could kind of get to a point and then would need to pay them. And so knew that we needed, we had put some money of our own into the business, but knew that that was not going to take us that far. And in order to prove out the concept and launch the business, we needed to raise some money. So we initially started with a goal of $500K. And just started taking any meeting that we possibly could. Not surprisingly, most of the investor community is men. And so, never mind that it was like probably half the battle to even get a meeting because, we would email or we would ask for an intro through a friend and the investor would be, probably was like, periods, like, why do I want to talk about that?
Yeah, how many different ways can you say tampon?
Right.
That sound appealing.
But we managed to line up a bunch of really, great, important meetings early on and just recognize that, after the first few, that we were talking to generally a community that had never even touched this product before. Obviously had never used it, but had never really interacted with it. And so it gave us this, both hilarious and very empowering opportunity to educate, as Alex mentioned before, where, sometimes we would have to unwrap the tampon in the middle of the restaurant and like dip it into water to show the guy, the investor, what happens in a woman's body as she uses a tampon. And so I don't know. I mean, that's kind of like the premise of all of it. And I think we walked away, in this position of power and information, able to educate this investor who would walk away extremely curious, probably have 10 other questions that he would need to like call his sister about or his wife, partner, daughter, whatever. We had investors asking us for product so that they could give it to their female friends. It was really interesting to see kind of how men reacted to this product and, this industry at large, at first with a little queasiness, then with like a ton of curiosity, and then eventually walk away kind of feeling totally confident that this was a business that could work.
Whose idea was putting the tampon in the water?
I don't know. I mean, I think like at some point there was like an awkward moment at the lunch table, and one of us was like, do you know how a tampon works? And just like unwrapped it. And
it's something that we do, behind the scenes all the time because
right.
All of the tampon brands expand differently and are stitched differently, and we know the products very well, so we know all about that, but it's not something that we had really taken to the outside world until we realized that the people that we were pitching to put money into the business and help us grow it didn't have firsthand experience with the product. And so part of that is unwrapping it, part of that is showing what an applicator in a tampon is, part of that is dipping it in liquid to show the expansion mechanism. And really, like, the process of doing that isn't at all meant to be humorous. It really is education. It's hilarious to look across a restaurant probably and see two women dunking tampons in water across from a man in a suit who sometimes looked very uncomfortable. But for the most part, it really was just a part of sharing what the product was.
Was there one reaction that just really stood out to you?
Well, one guy had asked us for a bunch of product, and then like 2 weeks after asked us for like another 10 units. And we were like, what? Like, but with no explanation.
We always demand an explanation.
Yeah.
I'll finish telling the story.
Yeah.
So we said, what did you do with all the tampons? And he said, oh, I unwrapped them all and looked at them. I guess he wanted to see if there were differences among the 10 tampons, even though there were only 3 SKUs.
Yeah, I think we like only gave him regulars. So.
Well, that's...
But we appreciate the hands-onness.
Yeah.
How does that play out? And so you guys have that demonstration, and then you were saying, Jordana, that it left people curious. So let's say I'm a first-time entrepreneur. I'm meeting with an investor. How do I end the meeting? You know, what's the proper etiquette?
That's a great question. I think it depends on like the stage of your pitch. It's, you know, where you are in the fundraising process. I would say in the beginning, like when we were first starting out, it was a lot of just like getting feedback, getting that tough love, making sure that, you know, we followed up with them to make you know, to see if they had any other additional questions. That's that stage. And I would say like further along in the fundraise and also anybody else that would be interested in chatting with you, about your business idea. And then I would say farther along in the process, it's, you know, just kind of flat out asking like, are you interested? Here's kind of the amount of money we're thinking of raising. Here's a minimum check size. This is the valuation we've set. So it can go anywhere from like more of a discovery conversation to like a just flat out ask.
And how many meetings does it typically take?
Also a good question.
A lot. In our first round, was a friends and family round. We raised $1.2 million. We had about 20 investors. All of the meetings that we took weren't necessarily truly fundraising. There was a lot of learning in the early days, but I would say that we took somewhere between 50 and 75 meetings. Bless you.
Thank you.
And really met with, I mean, the thing is at the beginning, you're not sure who will be interested, nor are you sure who's the best partner to help you grow the business. And so when we're meeting with investors, it's a two-way interview. Mm-hmm. And at that point, after meeting with, you know, high net worth angels and meeting with early stage seed funds and talking to a few potential Series A investors, we determined that a roster of small checks from high net worth individuals was the best path for this business.
And when you guys were talking to those investors in the early days, it's always suggested, you know, be upfront about what you're going to need and how they're going to be willing to partner with you guys and support you guys. What did you guys feel during that first year that you really wanted out of your investors?
A lot of what we wanted at first was access. So one of the reasons why we wanted a long list of investors were because we had so many questions across so many different areas of the business where connections would help. We were setting up our logistics infrastructure for the first time ever. We were setting up an early stage marketing plan for the first time ever. We were hiring a team for the first time ever. Of course, we had done a lot of those things in previous roles, but not exactly in this context. And the more people we had with more connections to help us figure out which platforms to use, which models we should be looking to as good examples, was helpful. And I think over time, we've transitioned away from having lots of one-off conversations about access to more of mentorship conversations with a handful of those investors who we stay in touch with ongoing. But at first, having the breadth of experience was really important to us.
I'm really glad you mentioned the logistics aspect because I think that's obviously a great way to transition to the third story. But it's really important for startups in the beginning to take that very seriously because if you don't, you just hurt yourself so badly in the future. How did you guys approach that?
It was it was incredibly important to us that, especially given this product, that we were setting it up in a way that made sense for the cadence of her period, and would arrive, you know, as soon as possible, because this is a product that if it doesn't get to you in time, like the customer is less likely to return the following month. So
understatement
logistic, understatement of the number, yeah. She'll hate us.
She'll never come.
Yeah. So that was an extremely important part of the back end operational piece of the business. You know, what we did at the beginning was really look to other companies where we thought their logistics were excellent. So our friends over at Harry's, you know, walked us through kind of what different metrics they tracked, and what was their partner good at, what were they not as great at, what things kept them up at night in terms of the carriers, which is like FedEx, UPS. Or was it more inside the four walls of the fulfillment center? We made a decision early on as well, although we weighed both of them, whether or not to outsource fulfillment. So, did it make sense to work with a third-party logistics provider, or did it make sense to fulfill in-house? Judging by our model, our assumptions of kind of how many customers we would acquire and how that number would compound over time, it made more sense to outsource from day one because of many factors, including like shipping cost. Volume plays a big part in how carriers charge for shipping. So we kind of just had to learn. I mean, neither Alex nor I really had any background in logistics operations management at all. Taken some classes, but I'm always better on the job. So it was really just about kind of modeling everything out, understanding kind of who would be that right partner for us day one. Could they scale with us? What kind of standards did they hold themselves to? What were we comfortable with in terms of if any type of error rate? It's just like all these questions that you had never thought of before. But I would say in this day and age, when everybody's getting packages delivered to them at home and ordering a lot offline, you step into the customer's shoes and think about kind of what best in class service looks like from their perspective.
What surprised you from those learnings?
How obsessed I was.
Something that I think was surprising was once the initial setup was in place, how logistically simple our business is because it's a subscription. So once a woman signs up, she's on a cadence. And for the most part, we have a feature where you can customize your box of tampons. So for every 18 tampons in a box, you can get whatever light, regular, super mix you want. For the most part, women keep the same mix and keep their cadence. And once they sign up, they're happy with the product and it just keeps coming. So we have this predictability about volume that a lot of other businesses don't have. It really is just making sure that the first order is perfect and gets to her where she needs it, when she needs it. That's really the time where we're trying to impress the customer. And for the most part, she might be ordering it right before she gets her period. That's when she thinks of ordering tampons. So that first order really matters from a logistics perspective. And then after that, we're really just maintaining on a cadence.
I think those early conversations and investment that you guys placed there are so critical because so many startups in that first year run out of product or something goes wrong and they can't get their product to their customers. And that just provokes a whole load of awkward conversations where we're emailing people, so sorry, I can't get this to you for 6 months. And it's hard to get someone back after that.
Yeah,
totally.
And that was a non-starter for us.
Yeah, in our
was
business,
the thing that we were scared of.
That's the kiss of death in our business. For some businesses, it works, right? Like scarcity can be attractive and used as a marketing tool, but for us,
would not be good. For an entrepreneur who's in your shoes when you were just having those early conversations, are there a couple pieces of advice you can equip them with that you've learned about logistics?
Such a good question.
It's such a black box.
Yeah. Something that we, I think, learned from we have an operations and logistics advisor who has been crucial to our learning process.
Advice number one.
And so I think get one of those. And the second piece is learn from that person how to negotiate a logistics related contract. I don't think we knew what were the things that we could or should push back on and how aggressively to push back. We knew at a high level what we wanted our costs to be in certain areas, and we knew what our expectations were, but we didn't know benchmarks, and we didn't know exactly how to frame the asks and prioritize them and know how that would impact our long-term contracts with partners. And so having that person who is really helping you, even just 1 or 2 hours a month, and can advise you whenever you're in a negotiation is really helpful.
Perfect. So as this is about build, I want the last question is not going to be about a story, but it's because I know you guys, so I get to pick one. You're about to have Lola's first birthday next week, right? Next week is when you're kicking off the multiple celebrations. As
Yep.
you reflect on this last year, what's been for each of you the most meaningful part?
I think for me, it's probably assembling an incredible team. We've been just incredibly fortunate to have found passionate, smart, driven, hungry people who push us, and who are extremely motivated and asking the right questions, and also never accepting kind of baseline from themselves. So that's been, and they're just like so passionate about Lola and, changing the conversation, and being a part of the movement to make, these topics and questions that women have more accessible and less embarrassing. So I think that's probably my favorite part of the business so far. Highlight.
I think for me, it's been, this idea that we planted a seed. We started working on this over 2 years ago. We launched the business almost a year ago. And at that time, we didn't know if this topic or conversation mattered. It was really just the two of us kind of sitting around furiously excited in a room with this idea that women would care what was in these products and would change their behavior. And now, a year later, the conversation is bigger than us. Like, we don't even need to say anything in the conversation, and the conversation is happening, and we hear our team talking about all of these topics. We hear writers on the broadcast, on our blog, talking very openly about these topics. We've seen other brands pop up. We've seen government action to make tampons accessible. We've seen the tampon tax removed. We've seen like so much progress just in the past year since we started this conversation. And of course, there were a lot of other people working with us to start the conversation. But at first, it felt very small and insular, and now it really feels like a movement.
Did you anticipate that at all?
We hoped that it would happen.
I've been, as someone who's been following you guys, everything that you guys post on the broadcast, and even the articles that you post from, I'm a Lola super fan, but the articles that you guys post from other publications, it really does. It's not only about, thinking about it yourself. Those are things that I've sent to my friends that, we didn't even know that there was a tampon tax. It's not something that had ever come up in conversation. And so to see the influence as you guys hit year one, I can't wait to see what year number 2 brings, and I'm so grateful that we got to highlight. I didn't even know it was around your birthday, some of those build stories. Before we go, what's the best way for everyone to A, start getting an intro to Lola and sign up, and then B, how do they sign up for my favorite broadcast?
Great question. So to sign up for a subscription, you can go to our website, which is mylola.com. It's a very simple 3-step process. And then from there, you can also click through to our blog at the top header of that website.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much.
Thank you.
Jenna.